Leading up to the transition, there was a fatalism to it. People knew the time had come. They knew that the jig was up, as we would say.
There was a real visceral sentiment on the part of Chinese people to be reconciled with Hong Kong.
Here I was, a colonial oppressor, the last colonial governor.
For Hong Kong as a whole, today is cause for celebration, not sorrow.
What made it very difficult was that with virtually every other British colony, you would prepare a country for independence.
Now, Hong Kong people are to run Hong Kong.
There'd be a big ceremony, and the Queen or a member of the royal family would come, and you'd say goodbye, and they'd become a member of the Commonwealth. Hong Kong wasn't like that, because Hong Kong was never going to become independent. That wasn't part of the deal.
Britain is part of Hong Kong's history, and Hong Kong is part of Britain's history.
And the deal that was done seemed to square the circles in an international treaty.
These qualities in the agreement have been recognised by the British Parliament and by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress of China.
It took a mantra of Deng Xiaoping, one country, two systems.
One country, two systems, preserving two different political, social and economic systems within one nation has no precedent.
These were promises that China made that Hong Kong would have its way of life, its basic freedoms, a high degree of autonomy.
Rule of law, accountable government, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of association.
It gives Hong Kong a high degree of autonomy. Hong Kong people will administer Hong Kong.
At least for the first 50 years from the time of the handover.
Hong Kong was to stay the same for 50 years after 1997.
I think it was Margaret Thatcher's greatest mistake.
After the 1st of July, 1997. I should like to pay a tribute to the leaders of China for the vision and farsightedness of their approach to the negotiations.
The story goes that Thatcher believed that the lease was coming up on Hong Kong, the 99-year lease, and therefore they had to give it back to China. But they didn't have a lease on the island of Hong Kong. They could have kept it, and Margaret Thatcher simply chose not to.
We are confident that the ties between us will not only endure, but will continue to develop.
I hadn't quite realized the extent to which the rest of the world would be watching. And for a lot of European countries in particular, it wasn't just the end, as it were, of the British Empire. It was the end of empire.
We know what it looks like when the British tried to negotiate on behalf and did negotiate on behalf of Hong Kongers and said, don't worry, we got you. And then they walked away.
A toast to the future of Hong Kong. Hong Kong.
I think I, by and large, reckon it would probably be all right.
In general, there was a sense of optimism that this one country, two systems concept was something that would be abided by.
We were apprehensive at the time, with good reason, and the things we worried about at the time seemed remote, but possible.
If you said, well, how can you trust a communist to keep a free market society, they would say, oh, don't worry, this is the tail, meaning Hong Kong, is going to wag the dog.
That maybe this is going to be okay. Maybe we really will have 50 years of freedom.
As long as we are not pissing off Beijing, we'll be fine. Leave us alone.
To some extent, they were starting from just after 1997 to edge away from what they'd promised.
China was really showing clearly that they had no intention of keeping any of the promises.